मुसलमान के दो ही स्थान, कब्रिस्तान या पाकिस्तान।
वहाँ जो है हिंदू कहने का उसको हक नहीं है, क्योंकि खतरा है हिंदू, इसलिए उसको बुद्धिस्ट कहना पड़ता है। तो ये है साउथ एशिया की रियलिटी।
सेकुलरिज्म तो ये सिखाता है कि आप जाने, उसको प्रैक्टिस करें, और आप दूसरा कोई देखने वाला तो उसको ये होना चाहिए कि ठीक है कोई अपना रिलीजन प्रैक्टिस कर रहा है, अच्छी बात है, उससे उसको प्रॉब्लम नहीं होनी चाहिए। मेरे नजर में ये सेकुलरिज्म है।
जुल्फिकार अली भुट्टो was a populist. He rose up and he said, हाँ मैं शराब पीता हूँ, मैं लोगों का खून नहीं पीता। And everybody clapped and he beat the mullahs who had
this religious fundamentalism is problem for whom? And who would benefit from the secularism, for example?
What exactly can we do, 1, 2, 3, to avoid making the kind of mistakes that Indian and Pakistani cousins of mine have made in their countries?
And media, journalist, activism really can play a very important role. So support to you what you are doing in spite of risk and other things coming on. And that's what I think we need to be guarded in Nepal.
What you must avoid at all costs is rewriting the history of your country.
And how?
That's for you to find out. I don't know how to do that.
In Ayodhya, on the site of the Babri Masjid, Gandhiji would never have accepted it as a place of worship at all. Targeting of individual citizens, but the world sees overall Pakistan, state and people, as a terroristic entity. Jivanji, it is a proud moment for us here in Lalitpur that an event that has been sparked in Chitwan, Narayanghat Bharatpur, that we can be an ancillary event to that event in Chitwan. So thanks to Chitwan Kacheri and to the Democracy Dialogue, which have organized this event, and I'm privileged to be here with such activistic luminaries of South Asia. Both Harsh Ji and Parvez Sahab, they're both like the engines that keep chugging against a steep incline. It's interesting from this Kathmandu vantage, this Kathmandu Valley vantage, to look at Pakistan over the decades, and then to see all the ills that Pakistan had been suffering through religious fundamentalism taking off in a much larger country to the east, that is India. And so this Kathmandu vantage is from where we have been watching the evolution while being very careful and watchful about what's happening in Nepal, because Nepal is certainly not free from all the negative trends, negative populist trends, and particularly when populist governance gets attached to faith. What has happened to Pakistan and what is happening to India may be something that we can and should learn from. And as we always say, Nepal has a need to remain an open society for our own sake, because there is no development or progress in Nepal without us protecting our open space as exists. But also there is an additional responsibility for the people and civil society of Nepal, that we can also remain open for the sake of the rest of South Asia. And that is why I think it's very important for us to be alert to the trends happening nearby, especially things that where the majoritarian communities come down harsh on the minorities, given that our understanding of democracy being A, representative politics, B, protection of minorities. That should be the core value of democracy. Whereas a few days ago we even had a sitting judge from the Allahabad High Court saying that it's what the majority says that counts. And if this is going to be the attitude of the ruling forces, then what is going to happen not just to the minorities, but even to the possibilities of advance of the majorities? It seems that we are going on a downhill slide, and all of South Asia will end up at the bottom of the heap if we cannot control ourselves and our deepest negative urges. In that context, today, again, thanks to Chiton Kachari and Democracy Dialogue, we have an event that we have titled, Can South Asia Survive Religious Fundamentalism? The perspective from India and the perspective from Pakistan. And the very title tells you, and this was a title suggested by just 3 days ago, a day before yesterday in fact, by Parvez, Can South Asia Survive? Implying that we are already on that downhill slope. So this is a discussion to see where are we and where might we be headed and where should we head. And a little bit of extra backgrounding on Parvez Sahab is that he's not just a voice of rationality and rationalism in Pakistan, and for those of us watching Pakistan from the rest of South Asia, but he's actually also an anti-nuclear activist, activist against anti-nuclearization, anti-nuclear weaponization, given that he is a physicist himself, a nuclear physicist trained. He also is very much into science education. And the way he was mobbed yesterday by Kathmandu's A-level and 10+2 students yesterday indicates to you that he is somebody who appreciates the importance of reaching out to the youngsters, to see and to sensitize them, to begin with the sciences, and beyond that, the distance that he himself has covered from being a scientist to actually being a bulwark for civil liberties. He, in particular, focuses on speaking and speaking out in Urdu, that too on television media. And you can imagine in a country where blasphemy laws are rife in Pakistan over decades, how much danger he may have decided to subsume himself into for that. So he has done much of his work of public outreach in Urdu. And then we've got, he's also been active in producing documentaries in Urdu, realizing that to change opinions and to change behavior, you got to go in the vernacular. Many other things to talk about, but let me leave it there, and let me just add a few words about Harshji as well. We know that he was Indian Administrative Service Officer, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh is where he spent 2 decades or more. And then his turning point came with the Gujarat riots and Babri Masjid leading to the train that was burnt, leading to Gujarat riots and the pogroms. And since then, Harshji's increasingly isolated journey, I might say, has been trying to keep that window of openness and sanity alive in what is today India, given that it is the largest country in the world today by population. Means a lot that when something goes wrong in India, it impacts lakhs and lakhs of people. If there is a riot in some other country, you may have 10 dead, but by multiplication in India, by logic, it happens 10 times more than that. So we have to be worried about individual lives and to how to protect them, and cumulatively such a vast country. That is why I find a lot of power in what Harshji is doing, even as from this Nepal vantage point, looking out into India, looking where Indian journalism is going, where Indian media is going, how India's intelligentsia has decided to self-censor itself even before the heavy hand of the state comes towards them. In all of that, he shines out as a courageous person. His other areas of work, only briefly, are food security, mental health, and right to information. He's been pioneering in all these areas, and fighting poverty and analyzing poverty, researching poverty, given that the largest concentration of the poor by volume and by depth of poverty is in South Asia. There is no hiding from it. It's just that we are divided among 7 or 8 countries that we tend to forget how badly off we are in South Asia vis-a-vis the rest of the world in terms of poverty and number of people in poverty. So in that sense, his work in that area is also vital. And latest, of course, has been, his area of focus has been, after all the lynchings that have been going on, he started a movement called Karwan and Mohabbat. And that has again been very courageously reaching out to individually to the families who have suffered lynchings, who've lost their dear ones. So you can see the milieu we're working in here in South Asia. And the latest article that Harshji had was prayer as crime. That if you go down on the floor to offer dua or to do prayers, then you are attacked, even in a hospital when you are praying for your own husband's health. So this is the scenario, and it seems dire, but here we have individuals who have not lost their personal spirit of saying we can change things, we must change things. So here is how I propose to proceed with the event. One is, I would ask first Parvez and then Harsh to give us a sense, 10-12 minutes, of where their individual societies are. I won't even say countries or nation state, but societies are. And after that, I'll ask them to mull over, Parvez looking at India and Harsh looking at Pakistan. I mean, what is the sense you get of what's happening on the other side? Then I'll have a couple of other questions, and then we'll open up the floor. Thank you all for being here today for what I think is a very important meeting, not just for us here in this valley, not just for the people of India and the people of Pakistan, if I may be so bold, but all of South Asia. With that, let me pass you can pull the mic towards you, Parvez, and ask Parvez to hold forth.
First, let me, is this working? Yes. Is this working? Yeah. Let me say what a privilege it is for me to be with Harsh over here, an individual who has struggled against such odds. It's such an honor to be introduced by you, Kanak, because I see you as being so important to the well-being of Kathmandu, perhaps Nepal as a whole. And South Asia, of course, bringing us all together with your creation of Himal magazine, which was read across South Asia, and which is continuing its task. But the good that you've done here in terms of creating the schools, the public spaces, my hats off to you. Jeevan Chatri brought me here. I met him for the first time, and what a pleasure it is. And thank you all for being here. Kanak, the question you raise is a fundamental one, and I can perhaps best put across the dangers of religious fundamentalism and its effects upon society by talking about the Pakistan that I grew up in, how it changed and what it is today and where it might go in the future. I was born 3 years after Pakistan came into existence. That was 1950. In my neighborhood in Garden East, Karachi, we had neighbors who were Christians, a lot of Parsis, and a few Hindus as well. In my school, which was Karachi Grammar School, we never knew the difference between our friends who are Christians or Parsis, and there was even a Jew, Michael Meek was his name, and that was back in the 1950s. Well, since that time, my neighborhood in Karachi, where I no longer live, I live in Islamabad, has changed totally. Instead of our neighbors being Christians, we now have only Ismailis. Ismailis are the sect of Islam that I was born in. The Parsis have decreased in numbers to the point where there are only 5,000 Parsis left in the whole of Pakistan. At one time, they must have been in the lakhs, because Karachi was built. All the beautiful parts of Karachi, all the big buildings were built by Hindus and Parsis. And now all that is a distant memory of the past. Now, the Karachi that I was growing up in, back in the 1950s and the 1960s, began changing when the Christian families started to migrate out to the West. They left slowly, but when they left, they never came back. And so today, what you see is a monoculture instead of what was a pluralist culture at the time. I remember the times that my Christian Goan neighbors would come out playing their guitars and their banjos, and we'd dance in the streets, and we'd play cricket and have a lot of fun together. Nothing like that exists today. Now there are high rises over there where there were beautiful houses, but maybe that's because of the rising population. However, Pakistan was still more or less a pluralist country until I'd say the early 1970s. Now, between 1969 and 1973, I was in the United States. I was doing my undergraduate degree at MIT in the sciences. When I came back, I got a shock. I saw fewer of my neighbors, but even more, towards the end of 1973, I saw political use being made of religion. And this was a time when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who was elected with a massive majority fighting against the mullahs. You know, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was a populist. He rose up and he said, हाँ मैं शराब पीता हूँ, मैं लोगों का खून नहीं पीता. And everybody clapped, and he beat the mullahs who had organized themselves as a political force, and he won the elections, and that was in 1970. But that same Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, when he fell into political difficulties, he said, maybe I can bolster my position by declaring Friday a holiday, by declaring alcohol haram. And then in 1974, he did what set us down on the road for religious fundamentalism. He declared a particular sect of Muslims as being non-Muslims. He had them excommunicated by an act of the parliament. I am speaking, of course, of the Ahmadis, who are perhaps the most persecuted community among all in Pakistan. Well, Ziaul Haq then carried forth his mission after hanging Bhutto. Nothing that Bhutto could do could save him. He had appointed Ziaul Haq. He just picked him up from somewhere down there, put him up on top of the army, and after hanging him, Ziaul Haq was out of a raison d'etre for Pakistan. He didn't know how to justify his being president of Pakistan and chief of army staff, the top general. And so here comes Islam, and he says, now I am going to redefine Pakistan. No longer is it going to be a Muslim state. It is now going to be an Islamic state. What's the difference? One is where the majority of people are Muslim. The other is where the Sharia, the Islamic law, will be the law of the land. Well, that hasn't happened yet and will not happen. I'll tell you why, but that's a different story. Anyway, that is when religion was put in service of the state, when education was changed, when the curriculum was drastically reformed, remade, I should say, where everything had to be consistent with Islam, where even science was Islamized. So I have to tell you so many interesting things about that. I mean, I could go on for a long time. Like the head of my physics department, he had calculated the speed at which heaven was running away from Earth. Using Einstein's theory of relativity, mind you. And all sorts of crazies like that bubbled up from everywhere. Now, eventually those crazies were put into positions of high authority. So, Kanak, one day I was invited by the Ministry of Science and Technology to give a talk on science, progress, Islam, etc. And I said, look, there's a big hall, 300 people. And I said, look, keep them separate. This is the only way that science can progress. If you try and associate any science with a particular religion, well, that's the end of it. And we've seen countless examples of this in the past. We saw this even in communist Russia, under Stalinism, Lysenkoism, etc. So an important member of the audience got up. He was the Secretary of Science and Technology. He said, you are completely wrong. In the Quran, it is said that if a dog eats from your bowl, that bowl can be made pak, pure again, by washing it 13 times. So I said, yes, sir, you must be right, but can you tell me the temperature of the water, whether detergents were used, and how do you know that it is now pak? He blew up anyway. So now, to come back to the point. When you join religion and state together, then it is not just the minorities who suffer. Of course they do. Then they are second-rate, second-class citizens, as Harsha is going to tell us what will happen to Muslims in Asia, in India. But even more, you start cannibalizing those of your own faith. So, the Ahmadis who had strongly supported the demand for Pakistan today are the most persecuted. I mean, they believe in the two-nation theory. They're the most persecuted of people in Pakistan. The Shias are 20% of the population. That's not small at all. The Shias had been fully behind Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Jinnah himself was a Shia. When Jinnah went, fortunately he went soon, because had he lasted longer, maybe what happened to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman would have happened to him as well. But the Shias today see themselves as persecuted, and as we speak, there is killing, mass killing going on in an area of Pakistan called Parachinar, where the Shia minority is being bombarded by the Sunnis, and so the Shias have to go through Afghanistan to reconnect to Pakistan. If I was to speak of Ismailis or Zikris or the people in the northern parts of Pakistan, they all feel themselves as if they are persecuted people. Now, how is it that Muslims should feel persecuted in an Islamic state? That's because there's no limit to fanaticism. Today, if you ask, who is attacking the Pakistan army, which is the ideological defender, self-proclaimed ideological defender of Pakistan's physical borders and national ideology, it's not people like me. It's not secularists. They are being attacked by the very people they had promoted and put into place in Kabul. I mean the Taliban. So today the Pakistan army, its soldiers, and our police is terrified. I go and speak at the National Academy for Police, and they want me to explain to them why this is all going on. And I say, look, this is what we had promised, that Pakistan would be a Sharia state. This is what our army promises. But the Taliban, they say that we are the real ones who understand Islam, and we are going to make you true Muslims and bring our Sharia there. And so the bloodbath continues. But guess what? And I'll stop here. Guess what? The Taliban are also under attack. And by who? Daesh, also known as ISIS or the Islamic State, who are making life hell for the Taliban in Kabul. So, folks, once religion gets out of the bottle, and I hope it will never be the case here in Nepal, then hell awaits you. So be careful. Thanks very much.
A quick follow-up. Thank you. A quick follow-up before I go to Harsh, Parvez. The world seems to conflate the Pakistani people and the Pakistani state. The propaganda that is, utilized by all kinds of powers, particularly in the West and in India, marks the Pakistani as, if I might use the word, haram, because radical, yes. And so, do not the people of Pakistan suffer, therefore, for being identified with the Pakistani state, howsoever problematic the Pakistani state might be, but the people, such a large population, is being made to feel that they are part of the worst. Whereas you've just explained that within Pakistan, there's so much schisms and there's so much targeting of individual citizens, but the world sees overall Pakistan, state and people, as a terroristic entity.
Excellent question, and one not very simply answered, because every national state seeks to create a sense of national identity through its means of propaganda, which is principally with television and, of course, the media, and control over the social media. And yet, in spite of that, the fact is that parts of Pakistan are in open revolt against the center. The center is where I happen to live in, but it's principally Punjab versus the rest. So if you go to Balochistan, and I was there earlier last year, you see that it's like a land under occupation. You see machine gun posts on every hill, every hillock over there, and they're pointing down at you. And as you go down in the roads below, they stop you at checkpoints and ask you, "Tum kahan se ho?" To main kehta hu, "Tum kahan se ho?" Who are you to come from Punjab and challenge me, I being born in Karachi, with my father being a Baloch, that you dare to ask me? But I can do this because I'm upper class. Right? The ordinary man does it and challenges and gets shot. So,
what about the world's perception of Pakistan and Pakistanis?
The world's perception of Pakistan is clear, given that the Pakistani passport is the 4th worst in the world. By the way, I had such a problem coming to Nepal. The people at the embassy were nice in Islamabad, but I happen to live in Islamabad, even if it's at the other end of town, and I have to spend quite a lot of money getting there. But what about people who live in other parts of Pakistan? For them to get a Nepali visa is so difficult.
We'll come to that another time, because we always want Nepal to be the place where South Asians meet, and I had always believed it was easier for Pakistanis to come to Nepal, but your experience tells me otherwise. We'll come to that. Harsh, there is no limit to fanaticism, is what Pervez said during his presentation. And India seems to be testing the limits of fanaticism. So will you give us a sense of where your society is?
Thank you. Just very briefly, let me reiterate both how much of a privilege it is to be with Pervez and Kanak and with all of you here. And this conversation, I was just completely riveted by everything that Pervez said. India has truly lost its way. It's lost its way as a republic in ways that are profound. We had fought in our freedom struggle, our founding fathers and mothers, in the writing of our constitution. We had said we would build a country like no other, where it would not matter which God you worship or if you worship no God. It would not matter what language you spoke, what your ethnicity, what your caste, your gender. You would be fully an equal citizen, equal human being, equal citizen, protected by the state. When I spent some time in Germany and Europe, and I realized how special was this idea. In Germany, which is really trying to deal quite admirably with its Nazi past, still the idea that if you want to belong to Germany, you must respect the majority culture, you must know German, you must respect a certain religion, culture, etc., etc. The idea of India was that there are no conditionalities. You be yourself, speak your language, live your way of life, worship the way you like, and and love whoever you want to, and just eat what you want to, and a fully citizen, protected, equal belonging. I mean, the idea not just of freedom but of equal belonging without conditionalities. The only conditionality is the constitutional morality. Justice, liberty, equality, fraternity for all. Nothing else is an obligation. We had imagined and promised ourselves this land. And today we have so profoundly lost our way. We are becoming so close to Zia's Pakistan. And in a sense, it's almost as if the leaders of India today want to prove that Jinnah was right when he said, you have to live with people. That Muslims cannot be safe, and this is what, and we can come to the idea of Pakistan later, that Muslims are safe only in their samenesses, meaning everybody, and sameness, your identity is defined only by your religion, and only with people of your religion can you be safe. The idea of India was that don't look for samenesses, learn to respect difference. And these are two very profoundly different ideas. But before I go speak a little more about why we are in such a crisis, I'm inspired by Pervez's memory of his childhood and of how different India has become. I was born 7 years after India's freedom. My parents' family on both sides were actually from Pakistan, what is now Pakistan. They were from Rawalpindi, and amidst enormous brutality and violence were they uprooted and had to come to India. And yet, in my childhood, I do not recall my parents ever speaking anything about which was religious bigotry. I recall a child. I'm born in a Sikh family. We have a prayer room. Had a prayer room right through my parents' life with a Sikh. Sorry, I think. Hello. So I said my parents had a. I think this is better. So my parents had a Sikh prayer room, and in the way children are impetuous, I remember I was about 10 years old and I told my parents, this prayer room looks incomplete to me. And so I got an Allah, a cross, some of the Hindu deities. I put them up on the wall. And my parents never flinched until my father died at 92. That was what our prayer room looked like. I studied in an elite boarding school called Mayo College, which had other problems, but we had a British principal. And the school prayer was Iqbal's Labbe Aati Hai Dua, which today is seen as some kind of ghettoized Muslim prayer. It was, it was never an issue. Our films always had the Muslim as the kind Rahim Chacha who's always around. It was a time of idealism. It was a time of nation building. We had the horrors of partition behind us, but we had chosen a particular path. The freedom struggle led by Mahatma Gandhi was never just a struggle against British colonialism. It was always a struggle about what kind of India we would build after the British left. And this idea of equal belonging, what we call secular democracy, but the word secularism is also complicated. In France, secularism would mean to discourage a young woman from coming into this room with a hijab. In India, secularism means defending her right to wear the hijab. So we had a particular notion of what we call secularism, which is freedom for all to be themselves and to equally belong. The majority of Indians, Hindu, Muslim and all others, followed and believed in this idea. But not all. The RSS, and next year the RSS completes 100 years of its existence. The RSS said, no, India is a country that belongs to its Hindus, and particularly Muslims and Christians can never have the right of equal belonging, and they will be second-class citizens. They can live in this country if they choose. We don't want them, but if they choose, they have to live here as second-class citizens. And I'd like to underline that while the Holocaust was unfolding, the writings of the RSS expressed great admiration for Hitler, for how he dealt with the Jewish problem, for his nationalist leadership, and so on. So that was, and the two-nation theory actually was first propounded by the Hindu Mahasabha leader Savarkar. Then we had, of course, the Muslim League, which I've already spoken about, that Muslims can only be safe in a country of Muslims. And in the struggle of ideas, we finally ended up with a partition in which 1 million people slaughtered each other, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh. 15 million people were displaced, including my own family. It was the largest displacement in human history. And then India had to choose what kind of country it would build. And I just want to talk about Gandhiji's last fast, 2 weeks before he was assassinated. Think of an India in which these 7-8 million people, who've been displaced, have come, the anger, the rage, the violence of 1 million people slaughtering each other. Gandhiji was not in Delhi when the national flag was hoisted. He was in Calcutta trying to, the Hindu-Muslim violence, and he went on a fast. He said, I will not eat until the last hand that is raised. And people said it was impossible, and all the violence came to an end. He came to Delhi. He was planning to go to Pakistan and do the same. But when he came to Delhi, he found there was so much anger and rage. His last fast, 2 weeks before he died, I regard as perhaps the most glorious moment of the building of my country. He had 3 demands. The first was, of course, the sharing of, the treasury had to be, and people said, let's not give Pakistan its share. Pakistan would have become bankrupt. And he said, brothers can separate, but they're still brothers and they must get their due share. But the other 2 demands were even more important. The first was that the Dargah in Mehroli in Delhi, the mosque in Connaught Place, people had gone, and the Hindu Mahasabha, RSS, people had gone and placed Hindu idols and said, now no Muslim places of worship. Gandhiji's demand, he said that no true place of worship can be built on desecration and disrespect to another religion. It cannot be a place of worship. So we must return the mosques and the dargahs to our Muslim brothers and sisters and with great respect. And therefore I'm convinced, incidentally, that he would never, the great temple that is being built in Ayodhya on the site of the Babri Masjid, Gandhiji would never have accepted it as a place of worship at all. His third demand, the only way as if my family had come, the only way I could get a home was if a Muslim left it for Pakistan. So I had a vested interest in driving people away. Gandhiji said, at that point there were more Muslims in the refugee camps preparing to go to Pakistan who had been driven out of their homes. His demand was that we have to go to the Muslims who are here and say, no, this is your country, stay back. Which means I have been displaced from my home and homeland by Muslim mobs, and I'm here. And Gandhiji is saying, tell the Muslims here that I will go back to the refugee camp, you come back home, this is your country. I think that it was such a powerful moral moment. And everyone, including even Nehru and Maulana Azad Patel, everybody said, there's too much anger, don't do this, Gandhiji. And he said, no, this is the time. The first day there were 10,000 people on the streets in his support. By the 5th day there were 1 lakh people in the streets of Delhi in his support. All these demands were accepted. The Hindu Mahasabha RSS had to sign agreements to return the places of worship. I believe my country was formed at that moment. And that is the country I have to defend. He was assassinated 2 weeks later, as we know, by somebody driven by the Hindutva ideology. And with the spilling of Gandhiji's blood, the country came back to its senses in a sense. And we felt the issue had been resolved, but it hadn't. And fast forward, I don't have the time to take you, there were many mistakes as we went along. But in the last 10 years, since Mr. Modi came to power, the RSS, which never believed in this idea of India, the RSS which actually admired Hitler, that RSS is now not only in power, every high constitutional position in this country is held by people who spent their lifetimes as members of the RSS. The RSS, for 50 years, never even in their headquarters kept the national flag, because it's a symbol of equality between religions. They are now in power, and they are dismantling secular democracy every day. Let me just give you 2 or 3 examples, and about where I've been speaking wherever I go around the country. I'm trying to bear witness as a non-Muslim. I feel I need to say loud and clear what is happening to my brothers and sisters, and I take that role very seriously. I've been going around the country, and the word, and people of Muslim identity want to sit with me in a room like this where they can speak. The word I've heard most is fear. Dar laga rehta hai. All the time we are living with fear. And that is what lynching does. It's symbolic performative violence. So one young Muslim man is killed on a train. Across the country, Muslim young people have told me that we're really frightened when we travel. My mother says, if I phone you, don't say salam alaikum. Don't get into a discussion. Don't let anyone know that you are of Muslim identity. That fear is something that, I think it most defines what we have become as a country. I think of Rabindranath Tagore's beautiful poem where he describes the country. He says, where the mind is without fear, that's where he starts. Where the mind is without fear, where the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. I just read this, I get goosebumps, I want to cry. Where have we lost our way? There is so much, bigotry has become so much a normal part of our lives. I mean, this latest article that I wrote, about where prayer has become a crime. A woman is doing namaz outside a ward because her loved one is in danger, and she's picked up. People sort of make a huge complaint about it, and so on. People praying, I in my childhood, if somebody on a train wanted to say namaz, everyone would respectfully make space and be quiet while the person prays. Today, if somebody dares to do this, there'll be a mob which starts sort of singing Hanuman Chalisa, taunting the person before he prays. Bigotry has become so normalized. I mean, let me tell you, say a story. A good-looking young man was telling me, Muslim man, that in class his teacher was reading out names, and suddenly she said, Acha and so on, and love jihad. So he's saying, sorry ma'am, that's not my name. No, boys like you get into love jihad, and the whole class laughs, and that becomes the name by which he is. This routinization of bigotry and hatred. I could take the whole morning and the afternoon. I will stop here. The idea that now mosque after mosque, they're saying we want to know what there was a temple underneath it, and we have to restore the crimes of history, the alleged crimes of history. Although the law prohibits it now, but even the courts are looking away, and day after day we are seeing. Most recently, there was a mosque in a place called Sambal, built by Babur, and now they're claiming that there was a temple built by the Almighty Himself to Kalki, who is the yet unborn incarnation of Vishnu, who is going to come to end Kali Yuga and start Satyug. That temple was destroyed and a mosque was built here. My question is, okay, if you're going to go that far, let's look under every temple, you'll probably find a Buddhist stupa. Let's dig under the Buddhist stupa, you'll probably find Adivasi prayer places. Where are we going? This hatred, this radicalization of the Hindu heart and mind that we are seeing unfolding, and I feel in Nepal we must be ready for this. So this is where we are.
Harsh, that was wonderful. But you got me provoked. Okay? I completely support that woman who's praying outside the emergency ward. Okay, she's trying to save her dear husband's life or whatever. That's fine. On the other hand, you cannot defend these mosques which have 20 loudspeakers and they go bang, and every azan is ear-splitting. I mean, I live unfortunately opposite such a mosque in Islamabad, and they don't let you sleep. Now that sort of thing exists in India as well, and that is why that is a provocation to the majority over there. So it's time that the Muslim minority in India also respects the law of the land. What you say is absolutely right. I mean, this is nonsense that you dig up a 15th century mosque and you say there's some god, there was a temple beneath it. That's nonsense. But Muslims in India have refused to modernize themselves. Muslims in India insist on the madrasa system, which is from the 11th century, teaches nothing except rata. You learn the hadith, you learn the Quran, you become trained parrots. Now that is the problem with our education system. I know you can't speak about it, don't speak about it, please don't. But I as a Muslim can I not? And so if I was to go to India, I'd say, you bloody people, wake up. You can't live this sort of life. You are putting your own self, the innocent Muslims, get yourself some bloody new leadership. You are following the Delhi Imam, who is an idiot. So sorry, I got a little upset about it.
You're really, but Kevin got provoked, and let me ask Harsh to respond.
Yeah. Parvez, I hear you, but I'm also provoked. So let me respond. What you're saying effectively is that Muslims are facing substantially the consequences of their own failures to reform and to have a progressive leadership. I have a huge problem with that. Of course there are problems in the Muslim community, but there are problems in all our communities. Of course we need to reform. But my solidarity with you who are being persecuted cannot be conditional on your good behavior by my definition. My solidarity has to be unconditional, number one. Number two, yes, the azan on loudspeakers is a problem. If you have a problem with it, there are loudspeakers on every temple. And, unfortunately in North India, I don't know where we've also lost our culture, there'll be the most Besura recitations. I mean, I just can't bear listening. I mean, I much prefer the azan because at least it has some tunefulness. So if we say, yes, as a country, I'm just giving as a country, let us decide that all places of worship, not just the azan. That I'm happy to do. Why do we only, and that is, why do we say the mosque should not have loudspeakers? We will do the rest of it. The lady doing her azan and the chief medical officer said, we don't allow all this, public praying. I go to any hospital and people will be praying. There are little temples in prayers. So the idea of triple talaq, let me give another example. See, obviously, it's a terrible sort of custom. But today, the law, the Supreme Court has said that a triple talaq does not end a marriage, so they are still married. Mr. Modi's government has brought in a law saying that for the first time you can be sent to jail. So he said triple talaq, the marriage still continues, the Muslim man is sent to jail. The problem is, I can be a Hindu. If the problem is abandoning women that you are married to, as a Hindu, I can say talaq once, I can say talaq 3 times, I can say it 100 times, I can say no talaq and I can abandon my wife. It's not a crime. Our Prime Minister has done the same. He abandoned his wife very early. That's not a crime. A Muslim man abandons his wife, that's a crime. So I think that yes, reform is necessary, but reform is necessary across. We should not distinguish one community and say you are responsible to reform, and until you reform, you legitimately don't have equal rights in this country, and the rest don't need to reform. Last thing I'd like to quickly say in response to you, is that I think in the left, and I belong very much to the left, I think in the left we have been intolerant of religious faith. And I myself say, I mean, you look at a religious person, you say, this guy. There is nothing wrong with religious faith if it teaches you. I mean, Gandhiji was deeply religious, which is why he was a very devout Hindu, which is why he took the decisions that he did. It was his. Maulana Azad was deeply religious. Savarkar, the founder of Hindu Mahasabha, was actually a self-professed atheist. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was not a practicing Muslim most of his life. And they wanted a religious state. Gandhiji and Maulana Azad were deeply religious, and they were willing to give their lives, and one of them did give his life for the rights of the other. So the problem is not religion, but the misuse of religion. We need to be tolerant of religious faith. We need to talk about reform across all religious faiths. The Muslims alone cannot be held responsible for the failures of reform.
I personally am also provoked to make a point here. What Pervez you referred to was essentially an assault on the olfactory senses. Whereas where things have gone is far beyond that. We would want all our temples and mosques and all religious institutions to do away with the speaker that forces the surrounding populace of whichever faith to listen to a prayer or a azan. That is there, and I think that applies across the board, and there should be a campaign throughout South Asia to bring down those loudspeakers. Yet what we are talking about right now is, as Harsh said, was it Harsh or was it you? But we shouldn't allow India to go the way of Pakistan, because here the term Harsh uses, bearing witness, because such a vast population within India now. You have the Adivasis, you got the indigenous people, you got the Dalits, but especially it seems to me the Muslims are living in fear.
200 million people.
Sorry?
200 million.
200 million people. And here the symbolic performative violence that is happening, I would believe that perhaps it's not even happening in Pakistan at this scale. And so the number of people, 200 million, having to live under fear. And another term I've heard used recently, was it you, Harsh? Degrees of anguish. The level of anguish. So does it really pan out? I mean, what you're saying is something that is probably indicative of something deeper. So let us have your word on that.
Well, Muslims in a minority cannot afford, or no people who is a minority can afford provoking the majority. And that should be a principle for self-survival. No state should operate on majoritarian principles and have a state religion or attempt to suppress any other religion. In fact, my belief is that Religion is a matter between an individual and his creator, whichever form that takes. So on this I think we can agree. Were I living in India as a Muslim, I would be fighting against the Muslim leadership, which is totally bankrupt, which has only one thing to recommend itself, and that is they profess to be religious. They have shunned modernity. The idea of triple talaq is so abhorrent to ideas of human justice. The repression of women in Islam, the fact, and this is something that is openly verifiable, that Muslim women are forced to cover up. You see this in Iran, where this has led to tragic consequences. Were you to go to Peshawar, you would not see a single uncovered face over there. Were you to come to my university, where I began teaching in 1973, and where there was only one girl in the whole university community who had burqa. Now in that same university, in the same classroom, I can't see the faces of my students. Now what is it that has happened? It's promotion of a fundamentally regressive Islam by the state that has put us into this ditch, out of which it will take us 100 years to climb out of. Look at what has happened in Islam, and don't say that this is not Islam. Are the Taliban not Muslim? Well, there are people who say, no, they are not Muslim, they don't really understand Islam. Well, then who understands Islam? Answer is, I don't know. Well, Prophet Muhammad knew, but after him, nobody seems to have understood what Islam is all about. So let it be a personal faith. And say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. That's fine, that's good. But then don't force others around you to do the same thing. So that is my only contention over here. And again, what you're doing is completely right by saying that, yes, there are degrees of suppression, and you see that in India. It is nowhere as close to the suppression of the women in Afghanistan by the Taliban, or the suppression of Ahmadi Muslims. They call themselves Muslims. I don't know whether they are. If I say they are Muslims, tomorrow I can be, all this I suppose will find itself onto the internet. But if, I'm not saying this, okay, let me repeat this. If I was to say that Ahmadis are Muslims, what would happen to me? They kill them everywhere they can find them in Pakistan. And so, I was so happy when I went to Dhaka a month ago, and they were celebrating Satyendra Nath Bose, his 100th anniversary there. You've all heard of the boson. They were celebrating a Hindu in Bangladesh, in Dhaka University. Could I imagine Abdul Salam, Pakistani Nobel Prize winner in physics, being celebrated in my university? No. We tried in 1980. The Jamaat-e-Islami came and said, "Ye aaya to hum iski taange tod denge. We'll break his legs." So this, avoid becoming a Pakistan India.
I think perhaps we could turn the focus a bit towards Nepal, because we are gathered here in Nepal and hoping that the kind of majoritarianism, even though we don't have the kind of majority community as such, but there is majoritarianism in Nepal as well. Let it not be overtaken by something that is copied from neighboring societies. And in the particular instance, given that there are complexities within Nepal's recent political evolution, and given that India is run by essentially a Hindutva state, so our focus for Nepal would be how much can we remain a open, inclusive, quote-unquote, tolerant society and not be buffeted by what's happening next door. Before we come to Nepal, you've been to Bangladesh recently, you will have been watching what's happening in Bangladesh. It seems that, there are certain issues since the departure of Sheikh Hasina, that there's been some targeting perhaps in parts of Bangladesh, but it doesn't seem to be a countrywide movement against the minorities of Bangladesh, but there is this Indian surcharged social media campaign and media campaign in India to prove that there is such a movement ongoing. So may I ask Harsh, how are you watching Bangladesh, and then we'll go into Nepal. Together, please.
See, Bangladesh, when I talked about the idea of India and the idea of Pakistan, why Bangladesh's history is very important. Joe Biden somewhere said that America is the only country in the world which is an idea more than a place of geography. I feel much more than America, India is an idea. And actually Pakistan is an idea, or was an idea, will be an idea, I don't know. The idea, which I'll just reiterate, the idea of Pakistan is that you are defined primarily by your religion and religious identity, and people of one, you can be safe, you can progress only if you live in a place where there are people of like yourself. So there's a safety only in samenesses. The idea of India at its best was that, no, don't look for samenesses at all. Celebrate, respect and even celebrate our differences. India is such a beautiful country and culture because we've actually taken so much from Islam and from many other cultures from around the world. So there was this idea when partition happened, the clash between ideas. Bangladesh actually, I think, proved the end of the idea of Pakistan, because they said, yes, we are Muslim, but we are also Bengali. And we love our language, and we love our culture and our songs, etc. And if we lost 1 million lives in partition, we lost something like 3 million lives in the liberation of Bangladesh. So I think that issue was actually settled there then. Sameness of religion is no guarantee for any kind of, is not the kind of society that we should try to seek to build. I think that's, and Bangladesh, I think, is struggling with, again, between these two ideas. It is the clash of these two ideas that we see, and of course it's got hugely complicated with the cronyism that Sheikh Hasina certainly, I think, raised to great limits in collaboration with Mr. Modi and Adani and the likes. But I really wanted to talk a little more about Nepal. Nepal today, I think,
before we get to Nepal, one question I had been meaning to ask you regarding the narrative in India presently, particularly with the New Delhi elections coming up, and this brings in Bangladesh and Burma as well. So the Muslims, are being targeted in the sense that Muslims are being termed Bangladeshis and Rohingyas, and even both the opposing parties seem to be using the same narrative, except for the AAP party to say that you brought the Rohingyas, not us. And how does that impact the Rohingyas and Bangladeshis who may be there as such, but also the Muslims in general of the Delhi area?
So this idea, I mean, what have Muslims been told for a very long time? Musliman ke do hi stan, Kabristan ya Pakistan. So Pakistan was, it was like they're running a travel agency, one-way tickets to Pakistan for everybody who's a Muslim or who stands up for India's secular democracy. Now, we see much more that, the other is Bangladesh and Myanmar with the Rohingyas. It's terrible because now, if you're a Muslim and has something of an accent indicating you're somewhere from the East, you can be dubbed a Bangladeshi and therefore an illegitimate citizen, and the whole, what has happened in, with the NRC, etc. in Assam, it raises so much fear. And I feel really ashamed that they're saying this now, not just in Assam, not just in Bengal, but all across India. If you're of Muslim identity, this is going to be thrown at you. Delhi elections, and that the Aam Aadmi Party, instead of countering it, is saying, no, that's what you are responsible for allowing the Bangladeshis to come here. So, the expansion of Muslim population. So, these bogies of, the BJP very often said, right, I remember in the Gujarat elections, when Mr. Modi was, the slogan was that Congress will win here and Musharraf will celebrate in Pakistan, etc. So, there's this whole identification of Muslim as not belonging to India, but identified somewhere with Muslim nations in our neighborhood. So that is there.
Then to come to Nepal, then let me set the stage and then we can talk. I have two questions, then we'll open up the floor. One, and we'll end at 1 p.m. Because they also have to head for the airport. And there's also Chiara coffee at the Dhogaima Cafe Quadrangle for those of you who want to stay back later. Khanta pera chia coffee khana lai. Let me make this two questions and then we'll open on the floor. One is regarding Nepal. Firstly, let me lay the ground as I understand it. What is happening in Nepal is there is RSS creep into Nepal, trying to take advantage of a politically unstable situation where they realize that the politicians who don't have height are willing to go with the populist narrative. So there's an attempt to create a narrative in the plains and in the hills. And in particular, to take the name of the organization, Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, it has its own office, a 5-story office near Gujeshwari in Kathmandu, and it works with many affiliates, Nepali affiliates, as well as affiliates that have deep links across the open border. So in that sense, what we see is that while the historicity of Nepal might be quite different from that of Pakistan or India, non-colonized and a country with a more syncretistic tradition, etc. But are we safe is a question I'd ask. Okay?
So yes, I'd love to hear Parvez on this as well. I, as a friend of Nepal, admire where Nepal is today. It is actually like an island in South Asia. It's the one place which actually is not buffeted by religious fundamentalism and hatred in South Asia, if you look around. But is it secure? Not sure at all. And also that Nepal was able to, after the terrible conflict that you faced for so many years, how quickly you rebuilt. The global hunger index, I just was looking at it. India keeps falling every year. We are such a wealthy, we have so many dollar billionaires, but we are now even below Pakistan. We are 110 or 15 or something. And Nepal is somewhere in 60s. So there's something that Nepal has done right, which we need to acknowledge and celebrate and understand. But on the other hand, the intervention of the RSS here. See, the RSS is not a representative of the Hindu faith. It has nothing, Islamism is not Islam. Zionism is not the Jewish faith. Hindutva is not the Hindu faith. So please understand, and if you allow the RSS to penetrate this idea, I would define each of these, Zionism, Islamism and Hindutva, as an idea that you can only prove that you love your religion by hating the other. Gandhiji was reminding us the only way you can love your religion is actually by respecting and loving every other. These are two very different ways of understanding religious faith. So decide if you want to be a practicing Hindu. If you go down the path of Hindutva, you're actually no longer staying with the idea of the practicing Hindu. And you have to be really, really careful. And how quickly you go into that land thing of fear, and just sort of leaving off the earlier discussion. And I really enjoyed listening to Parvez. I hear his anger, but I worry about this idea that we somehow globally we start to think of the Muslim as uniquely prone to radicalization. I believe in my country the real problem in India is the Indian Muslim is among the least radicalized people in the world. If you just see per capita for 200 million people, they have still accepted and believe it is the radicalization of the Hindu heart and mind that I'm seeing growing every day. I'll finish here. A soldier, a railway soldier, policeman, he got into a train and he got in an argument, he shot dead his superior, and then he went and he found 3 different people of Muslim identity and he shot them. Then he shot a video where he said, I'm doing this for Modi and Adityanath, etc. I wrote an article. The next morning, a young Muslim colleague of mine, she came into my office and she was wailing, and she was really weeping, sobbing away. I sat her down, I said, what has happened? She said, since that happened, I cannot sleep, I cannot think. Because the one thought that comes into my head is that they could have been my father, they could have been my brother. What do I do? And so I said, there must be 1 million homes. We had 200 million Muslims, and maybe 1 million homes where this conversation is happening. And Mr. Modi said nothing. I wrote an article, the speech that Mr. Modi did not make, which is saying that I'm so anguished by what has happened, and I want to assure my Muslim brothers and sisters that they belong equally to this country. I think we should not confuse the idea of religious faith with the politics of hate. And I think we need to make that separation. In Nepal, you want to be a religious Hindu state, you want to be a state in which a number of people follow the Hindu faith as they understand it, by all means, that's it. Going down the path of Hindutva is so dangerous. Please understand, you want to go to where Zia's Pakistan and Modi's India.
The observations I gave on Pakistan were over a lifetime. Yeah. The observations I'll give you over Bangladesh will be 5 days that I spent there. I went for a physics conference, but I spent a lot of my time talking to students, and mostly in Dhaka University, but other universities as well, and I was so impressed by the multiculturalism and the religious pluralism that I saw there. I know I have seen very little, but the very fact that within Dhaka University, I could go to a temple and hold a study group over there with students, to me was mind-blowing. When I saw a statue of Gautam Buddha, which is 30 feet high, constructed inside Dhaka University and constructed over the last 7 or 8 years, I said, this is something you would never see in another Muslim country. I've been to Algeria, I've been to Morocco, I've been to Afghanistan, Iran, lots of them. But I'll tell you, Bangladesh, because it was born out of struggle against Islamic Pakistan, is intrinsically, fundamentally secular. Now, there is an attempt to change that. There's the Jamaat-e-Islami, there are the Razakars. They were making the same demand as in Pakistan during Bhutto's time, which is declared the Ahmadis as non-Muslims. And when I was there, this is last month, there was a big ijtema calling precisely for this. I saw the BNP holding rallies over there. I see that Bangladesh could be in danger, but I could also see that there are forces fighting against that. So when Muhammad Yunus, when he inaugurated our conference, you know what he said? I wish we could have this conference in every part of Bangladesh. Celebrating a Hindu, mind you, Shatandranath Bose from Calcutta. Now, where would you find a leader in another Muslim country saying this? So there is hope for Bangladesh. I think the RSS, the BJP is trying to subvert it. This fight over the supply of electricity, the Adani issue, the supply of electricity at twice the rate that it should be at, is a deliberate attempt to subvert the intermediate government and to create relations so that Bangladesh becomes a subservient state of India. But there are smart Bengalis who are fighting this, and so I am hopeful.
Well, we are all for smart Bengalis, and may they also help keep South Asia secular and inclusive, and I think not have to learn from the global north. Let me end with my final question to both of you. It used to be that when we in South Asia or the rest of the global south set standards in media or in civil society or intellectualism, we look to the global north to provide us with the directions. Knowingly or unknowingly, we tended to do that. But the breaking point seems to have been Gaza. And what has happened there, and being seen, the carnage being seen in real time around the world, it seems that now we are not to set our standards by looking at any, by now it seems, mythical standards set by the global north, but it's ourselves, let's say the Bengalis of Bangladesh, each of us to set our own standards, and Nepalis of Nepal. So in that sense, where do you see global south and South Asia, which makes large proportion of the global south, perhaps half or more by population? What should we learn from the north, and what should we set for ourselves? Why don't you get started, and I'll pass it on.
Okay. This is indeed a unique situation where you have a globally broadcast genocide. You can watch it on television. You can see hospitals being bombed and refugee camps being attacked by aircraft, by drones or whatever. It's unique because half the Jews in the world oppose it. The other believe that there is no other way to protect themselves, that Israel has the right not just to exist, but to exert hegemony over all of its surroundings. And so it does not put any limits upon the size of its borders. In this process, it has been armed to the teeth by the United States. So the US, whether it is under Biden or as it will be under Trump, holds equal responsibility with Israel on committing mass slaughter. Now, this is a case where geopolitics has triumphed over humanity. What the rest of the world needs to do is to broadcast this message and see it as the overwhelming failure of humanity to assert its humane impulses. These are not the only countries that have committed genocide. My country, by the way, didn't kill 3 million. It's a very disputed statement. But even if they killed 300,000, which is more likely the case, it has never been held responsible, even by its own people, and even today it refuses to apologize. And 300,000 is 6 times larger than the number killed in Gaza. And if one was to look at Sudan, the numbers there are horrendous. Nevertheless, I think what you said is right, that Gaza is unique in the sense that this is there before the world community, a challenge to its collective conscience. And if we fail, the consequences are even greater than that of the genocide in Bengal or Sudan or or happened in other parts of Africa, and it's a grim situation.
I think your question is really critical. First, I'd say that this conceit that the ideas of democracy and secularism are actually Western creations which are being imposed on reluctant people from the global South. It's extraordinary how. So I was spending a few months in Germany on a fellowship which prides itself as collecting people of the intellectual elite of the world, and the very fine people. The Ukraine war happened, and we were sitting down together, and one of my colleagues there said, one of the fellows, she said, the time has come to defend European values. So I said, wow, which values are you speaking about? Are you talking about the Holocaust? Are you talking about, are you talking about colonialism? Are you talking about the annihilation of indigenous populations? Or are you talking about slavery? So she was, she said, I'm so sorry. I mean, we just keep thinking in this way. The ideas, of democracy and human rights has come to us from all of humankind in different ways. I mean, I feel the idea of fraternity has come best from Africa, for instance, and what is best, this idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, etc. So, so firstly that we all own and all have contributed to these ideas of justice, equality, fraternity. I think that is one thing I want. And yet, when they pride themselves, when Gaza has happened, it is a tectonic moment, and for the reasons, and very beautifully articulated by Pervez, the refusal of the global north, and again, very progressive people in the global north. When I travel there, I go to universities. I was invited, there was a global conference of human rights in the University of Connecticut, for instance. I was amazed at how people only spoke about the genocide of October 7th, and everything else is self-defense, and so on. And I think it has exposed to us, and I said there and I said again, I thought when we said never again, we meant never again for all people, not just for some people. I thought humankind had at least reached a place that when a child is killed, we don't first check whether she's Muslim or Jewish to decide whether we should grieve or not grieve. But clearly we haven't got past. And for Israel, which is just, still the living memory of the Holocaust, to do the South African in the International Court of Justice, they said beautifully, you first became an occupying state, then you became an apartheid state, and now you become a genocidal state. And how can you justify it? From my own autobiographical journey, after 2002 in particular, I quit the IAS and so on. It became like 75% of my extended family, all my relationships, friends, people I'd grown up with, completely cancelled me out of their lives. And I had to really start life again, like in AD and BC. And one of the things they kept saying to me is, my extended family would say that, Harsh, we are ashamed of you. I'd say, why? That we suffered in partition, and our village is sort of become legendary for how brutal was the violence. After all that we suffered in partition, you've gone and taken the wrong side. And my answer to them is, and I kept trying to explain, I said, after all that we suffered in partition, who better than us can understand what it means to be targeted for your religion and identity? So I am on the right side, it's you who are on the wrong side. And I want to say that over and over again to the Zionists of Israel, how can you were not doing this, were you doing this in defense of just the Jewish people, or of all persecuted people? I think that question, is so loud and clear, and the global north has actually shown that it has not progressed.
So then here's what I think the global north is lacking, and I open up the floor now. The global north is by and large lacking individuals such as Parvez and Harsh, to be able to speak truth to populist power, not just truth to power, because that's old hat. The populism in the age of social media, it requires extra steel in your body, in your heart, to be able to speak your mind, knowing that there'll be, within half an hour, there'll be trolls by the 100,000 against you. So in that sense, and then that leads to possibilities of physical violence as well, not just something off the smartphone that somebody can just pen for against you. So I feel that, and imprisonment, yes, indeed. So what I sense is the kind of isolation both of you have had to face in your vast societies, not even a smaller society such as of other parts of South Asia, including Nepal, but to feel the criticism or implied criticism and anger of hundreds of thousands who may not even know you, but you feel that it's there, and to still speak your mind. I thank both our speakers, and I now open the floor for about 10-15 minutes. Yes, Etta.
Thank you so much. Is it a one person, one question rule, or can we make it
one person, one question with an introduction first?
Sure. Hi, my name is Sanitya Kalika. I'm a Nepalese national. I live in India nowadays, though. I teach international law, authoritarianism, populism, international relations at OP Jindal Global University outside of Delhi. And I've been to both India and Pakistan. I'm regarded as a pro-Pakistan guy in India, and I don't know what's happening if I go to Pakistan. Tips is what I'm looking for from both of you, or either one of you. What exactly can we do, 1, 2, 3, to avoid making the kind of mistakes that Indian and Pakistani cousins of mine have made in their countries? What can the state do? What can I as an individual do? What can civil society activists like Kanakji do? Any tips, 1, 2, 3, that we can do to avoid the kind of mistakes that we are talking about?
In those two countries, the mistakes being made in those two countries?
Sure. So the mistakes that they have made in their countries, we are gradually in the, let's say, verge of making those mistakes. You have talked about the RSS office outside of Kuwait, which is a shame. But what can we do? What can the state do? What can individuals do? Thank you. And hey, I thought Pakistani nationals got visa on arrival in my country. I am so sorry to hear about that thing.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's
such a pleasure seeing you guys.
Thank you. A pleasure to meet so many friends here in Nepal. What you must avoid at all costs is rewriting the history of your country.
And how?
That's for you to find out. I don't know how to do that. I wish I knew how to do that in my own country, but what they've done is they've rewritten the history of Pakistan. They have glorified the invasions. Muhammad bin Qasim, the first Pakistani, do you know who that was? Muhammad bin Qasim in 712 AD. That's crap. That's nonsense. Now you have to contest that on the basis of a proper history, which means you say that the peoples who lived in this land are indigenous people. They belong there. They weren't living there on the basis of any kind of shared ideology. They were all different kinds. They didn't even want to break up in 1940. Well, maybe they did in 1947, some of them. But 20 years before that, they weren't even conscious that they were different from each other until the political leaders started fanning the flames. Now, that's the broad thing. Don't let them create a narrative which goes against objective history. Rely upon facts. So arm yourself with facts. That's the best thing that you can do, or anybody in this room can do. Get to know the facts of history so that when Hindutva comes around, when these Islamists come around, you have a solid answer for them against what they stand for.
It's such an important question. Actually, we should have had the whole seminar around it. Actually, it really is, because it's something that I'm asked at every turn. It's something I keep asking myself. Where did we lose our way? Quick answer was that I studied Nazi Germany, and India resembles in many ways what happened in Nazi Germany. But I realized that the true horror of Nazi Germany actually was not Hitler. It was ordinary people. So, don't imagine that some Modi or somebody else or Zia. I think it is what is happening to us as a people. And it is, we have to defend and stand up for the values that we believe in. I think in India, I see very clearly that the RSS is completing 100 years, and they've worked with great dedication to reach where they are. Those of us who believed in a country that would be kind, equal and just did very little about it or didn't do enough about it. So actually, and it's now not easy. I think we've lost a generation at least. A very dear friend, I won't name her, she's a very well-known writer, she wrote a message to me, summarized. She said, Harsh, the time for warnings is over. It's all upon us. We have to resist in the ways we can, and we need to bear witness. In fact, I named my column Bearing Witness after that message from her. But the second line was even more important. She said, however, depoisoning a river is not easy. There goes the rest of your life and mine. We'll have to dedicate the rest of, we are older, we need to dedicate the rest of your life. I think you'll have to dedicate the rest of your life. And too many of us will have to do it before we depoison the river. There's no shortcut.
Good morning. My name is Bishop Parajuli. I've spent some years with UN System around the world. Thank you very much for this really enlightening conversation. I've lived in India, I've traveled to Pakistan, and I've worked in several Muslim countries around the world as well. I think, you have laid out a lot. I'm a Nepali. It's the right time to have these type of conversation in Nepal as well, so we can learn not to get into the history and repeat it. One of the things also comparing with Europe and in continent in Africa, politicians, they try to mobilize populists. And they are only looking for a short-term gaining of power. They don't care about the negative implication, destroying harmony among ethnicity, religious, or whatever exists, or policies even. I know a country where bringing a wrong policy has destroyed totally that country. So same way religion can do that, or ethnic element, that's what they're trying to also create in Nepal for that matter. So we need to be conscious as citizens how politicians are exploiting these sentiments to benefit them. And there is one point probably I would have liked to hear from you both is the media, and Kanagdaju just mentioned about social media emerging and journalists or activists, independent people playing that role of watchdog and warning and etc. And of course there are repercussions individually or institutions as it's happening in India in some ways. So I think that's an element to guard for voters in terms of the election, as well as, from a constitutional point of view, not to fall into one religion or others and etc. The second point I want to mention, context of Nepal, is slowly these things are creeping also here. It's not that it's not happening. So thanks God, we still have a very strong free media. Now with the social media addition, there are lots of good voices. In fact, there are times the government changing certain turns of policies with that strong voice. And that is really important to continue. And the second point is also, neighbors or big powers influencing for their own interest. And for us not to fall into that trap and then bearing that negative consequences. Hopefully, like with the openness of the society, and we have some positive element, but guarding and learning from what you describe is really important. But you can still see certain political factions in Nepal pushing in one direction or other, be it from a political party point of view, or ism point of view, or religion or cultural point of view. They change party names, they change, turf, and talk all rubbish, what people want to hear. So I think that this is the element probably one could really learn, and media, journalist, activism really can play a very important role. So support to you what you are doing, in spite of risk and other things coming on. And that's what I think we need to be guarded in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe quick response, because we haven't dealt with media. From both of you, what is, beyond the very fine commentary that you gave, sense of where media can lead us towards the cliff or away from it?
Well, this is a unique age where you have no control over what is being said between people. That social media, they become echo chambers. All kinds of false news is propagated freely. And so this is a unique stage in humanity's progress. There's a unique stage from which it can either progress or regress. The only way that individuals can guard themselves against all kinds of fakeries, all kinds of propaganda, is by thoroughly educating themselves at an individual level, by reading a lot, and by exposing themselves to diverse influences. So I'm afraid this is a very general prescription. Your comment is excellent. I don't want to take up any more time.
Very quick response on two things. One was that, just underlining what I said earlier, I think the problem is not the populist leader. Trump is not the problem. It's the American people. I mean, it's extraordinary. He exposed himself just as Modi did during this last election. I mean, in all his vulgarity, in all his hatefulness, and people loved him. So we have to ask what is happening. Why are more and more people around the world choosing leaders who are teaching us to hate, who don't have faith in democratic principles, whose discourse is so uncivil, etc., etc. So it's a societal crisis, and I believe some of it has to do with the neoliberal model, which creates no future for young people. I also believe that neoliberalism as a moral model is basically the idea that greed is good. And the second very quick thing is, there was a recent book called H-Pop by Kunal Purohit, very fine book, because where he says that earlier these big riots used to be, with explosions of hatred, a train is burnt in Godhra, Mrs. Gandhi is killed, etc. He says now there's a daily injection of hate. Every morning you open your phone and you get a new thing. And Hindutva pop is actually popular songs, really catchy songs, which are so hateful. And they are now played everywhere, and the favorite pastime is on a Hindu festival, they'll go in front of mosques and start singing songs about raping Muslim women and about all sorts of things. And this has become, and recently the inauguration of the new government, installation of the new government in Maharashtra, during the official program, they had Hindutva pop singers.
Okay, we have 4 hands. Quick questions, because we have to finish in 12 minutes. So, हात माथि हजुर एउटा त्यहाँ उता पछाडि दुईटा तीनटा चारवटा यतापट्टि यता रोमा एउटा पनि हात देखिन त्यसैले अब तपाईहरु बाद यतापट्टि
I want to ask questions in Hindi and Urdu. Myself, Ramesh Kimire, freelance journalist. राजनीतिक नेता अपनी वर्चस्व को स्थापित करने के लिए धर्म के आड़ में जनता को भिड़ाते हैं और जनता अपनी जो डेली उनकी आवश्यकता है ना, उसमें बेसिक तो उनको वो चाहिए, वो देना ना पड़े, इसलिए इस होल साउथ एशिया में क्या है, कि भाई जनता को धर्म की आड़ में झुलसा दो, और वही झुलसाने के लिए यहाँ भी होल नेपाल में आरएसएस काम कर रही है। और जहां तक आरएसएस की बात करते हैं, 1962 में जो आरएसएस के गुरुजी हैं, उन्होंने नेपाल में आकर जो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन किया है, उसमें कितना अच्छा नेपाल के लिए पंडित नेहरू को, लाल बहादुर शास्त्री को उन्होंने जो किया है, क्या मोदी ने उसको देखा है, पढ़ा है, उसके अनुसार काम किया है? बिल्कुल नहीं किया है। मैंने कई आर्टिकलों में ये लिखा है। पाकिस्तान में भी यही है। मैं परवेज साहब से पूछना चाहूंगा, मेरी एक दोस्त की बेटी लाहौर यूनिवर्सिटी गई थी, तो वहां जो है हिंदू कहने का उसको हक नहीं है, क्योंकि खतरा है हिंदू, इसलिए उसको बुद्धिस्ट कहना पड़ता है। तो ये है साउथ एशिया की रियलिटी।
इसी को तो हम बदलना चाहते हैं ना, आप बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं, लेकिन यही तो सारा प्रॉब्लम है, इसी को हम बदलना चाह रहे हैं। बहुत अच्छा कहा आपने।
अब क्या हिंदुस्तान में जो है मोदी जी पूरा मीडिया को खत्म कर दिए हैं, और नेपाल इंडिया का रिलेशन जो उनकी पहली बार 214 में जो हुआ था, उसके बाद फिर नेपाल इंडिया रिलेशन अब कहां पहुंच चुका है?
गुड, वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन। हर्ष, वेरी क्विकली रिस्पॉन्स। नहीं, एक करें, जस्ट क्विकली। या प्लीज।
नहीं, आपकी हर बात से सहमत हैं कि जिस तरह से अगर आपको डर लगने लगे कि मैं साबित करूं कि मैं इस मजहब का हूं, जैसे मैं उदाहरण दे रहा था कि हिंदुस्तान के ट्रेन्स में हम लोगों का मतलब इट वाज लेजेंडरी दैट आप दोस्त बनाते थे, खाना शेयर करते थे, बातचीत करते थे। अब आप अगर आप मुसलमान हैं, आप डरे रहते हैं कि मेरी आइडेंटिटी किसी को पता नहीं चले। दैट इज टू मी द बिगेस्ट बिट्रेयल ऑफ व्हाट वी वर एज अ सिविलाइजेशन वेयर वी बिकम। तो जरूर हम लोग फख्र के साथ मैं कहूँ कि मेरा यह मजहब है, मेरा ये रहन सहन का तरीका है और आपका ऐसा है, और इससे मुझे हम बराबर के हैं।
Quick, sir. I would like to ask in Urdu to Parvez sir. सर, बहुत अच्छी बात हुई आप यहाँ पे, मुझे खुशी हुई। मेरा नाम अब्दुल करीम, कपिलवस्तु डिस्ट्रिक्ट से, और मेरा सवाल आपसे ये है कि आप बात करते वक्त आपने ये कहा कि मैं यूनिवर्सिटी में गया, जो पहले मैं देखता था बाद में देखा बच्चियाँ अपने आप को कवर करने लगी, बुर्खा हिजाब पहनने लगी। तो मुझे ये कहना है कि सर, जैसे हम अब घर में पैदा होते हैं, उसके बाद जब पढ़ना स्टार्ट कर देते हैं, तो जाहिर सी बात है कि बच्चा पढ़ना नहीं चाहता है शुरुआत में जाते वक्त, लेकिन माँ बाप उसको फोर्स करते हैं कि तुम्हें पढ़ना ही है। और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह आज मैं एक ग्रेजुएट हूँ, मैं नहीं पढ़ना चाहता था, तो आज एक ग्रेजुएट हुआ, तो मैं क्या क्लेम कर सकता हूँ कि फोर्सिबली पेरेंट्स ने वो काम किया है मुझ पर? नहीं करूँगा। तो इसी तरह, और अगर दीन के हिसाब से अगर देखेंगे तो एक बच्चा नमाज पढ़ने के लिए कहा जाता है, प्रेयर करने के लिए जब कहा जाता है, तो उसको तो कोई क्लेम नहीं करता कि ये फोर्सिबली इससे काम करवाया जा रहा है। अगर दीन के हिसाब से देखें तो ये प्रोपेगेंडा क्यों पूरी दुनिया में फैलाया जा रहा है कि जब हिजाब की बात आएगी या बुर्खा पहनने की बात आएगी, इसी को क्यों कहा जाता है कि ये फोर्सिबली किया जा रहा है? हो सकता है वो बच्ची खुद जो है अपने मर्जी से पहनना चाहती हो, और हम इस फंडामेंटलिज्म इसको कहते हैं, इसमें नहीं पढ़ना चाहते हैं हम। इसको बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर के जो संविधान दिया है, उसमें जो डेमोक्रेसी दिखाई गई है, उस पर बिलीव करते हैं। वो वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड का जो अपने आप को वो सेकुलर कहते हैं, उस तरीके का नहीं कि जो हिजाब ना लगाए उसको सेकुलरिज्म कहें। सेकुलरिज्म तो ये होनी चाहिए कि आपकी मर्जी, आप पहने तो सेकुलर, ना पहने तो सेकुलर, आपको किसी बात से प्रॉब्लम नहीं होनी चाहिए। एज अ टीचर आपको उस टाइम पे प्रॉब्लम नहीं होनी चाहिए थी कि पहले नहीं पहनते थे अब पहनने लगे। बहुत सारी चीजें लोगों को नहीं पता थी। अभी हम नेपाल के कंटेक्स्ट में देखेंगे तो शुरुआत में लोगों को कुरान पढ़ना नहीं आता था और बहुत सारी दीन की चीजें नहीं जानती थी। वो जनरली जैसे लोकल कल्चर था वैसे ही रहते थे। लेकिन अब क्या वो इस्लाम के बारे में जानने के और फॉलो करने लगे तो उनकी गलती है, वो चीज नहीं गलती है। सेकुलरिज्म तो ये सिखाता है कि आप जाने, उसको प्रैक्टिस करें, और आप दूसरा कोई देखने वाला तो उसको ये होना चाहिए कि ठीक है, कोई अपना रिलीजन प्रैक्टिस कर रहा है, अच्छी बात है, उससे उसको प्रॉब्लम नहीं होनी चाहिए। मेरे नजर में ये सेकुलरिज्म है। थैंक यू सर।
ठीक, मैं आपकी बात समझ गया। अगर लड़कियां अपने शौक से बुर्का पहने, चलिए कोई मजाक नहीं, पहन ले, लेकिन वो अपनी मर्जी से बुर्का नहीं करती। आपने देखा नहीं ईरान में कैसे रियासत ने उनके सर फाड़े जब वो बुर्का नहीं करती। उधर तो बाकायदा कैमरा लगे हुए होते हैं, बुर्का करो, हिजाब करो, नहीं तो तुम्हारी खैर नहीं। अरे मियाँ, 5 साल की बच्ची क्यों हिजाब करेगी? कौन क्या ये उसने अपनी मर्जी से ये किया या उसके माँ बाप ने उसको मजबूर किया? आप अपने आप को धोखा ना दें कि लड़कियां अपनी मर्जी से बुर्का करती हैं। नहीं, आप उनसे बात करें। खुदारा मैंने पूरी जिंदगी पढ़ाया है, ऐसी लड़कियां आती हैं मेरे दफ्तर में, आकर रोती हैं कि उनके साथ क्या सुलूक होता है और क्यों वो मजबूर हुई हैं बुर्का पहनने पर। वो सड़कों पर निकल नहीं सकती। आप किसी इस्लामी मुल्क में जाएं, अपना चेहरा दिखाएं तो मुसीबत आ जाती है, लेकिन आप किसी दूसरे गैर मुस्लिम मुल्क में जाएं तो औरतों को वो मकाम दिया जाता है, उनकी वो कदर की जाती है, उनको घूरा नहीं जाता। अच्छा, ये जो जाकिर नायक आए थे, आई विल बी वेरी ब्रीफ। जाकिर नायक आए थे, जाकिर नायक वॉज अ स्टेट गेस्ट इन पाकिस्तान। बाकी बात मैं अंग्रेजी में करूंगा ताकि सब लोगों की समझ में आ सके। जाकिर नायक केम टू पाकिस्तान एज a guest of the state, invited by Shahbaz Sharif. He went to, first of all, an orphanage. In the orphanage, he refused to distribute certificates to 9-year-old girl children, saying, Islam says that you have to cover up and never be before any male. Now I say, shame on Zakir Naik. Shame on those who invited him. Then, और ये सुनिए मियाँ, there was a girl in Peshawar, and this was openly televised, this is on social media, who got up and very reverentially addressed Zakir Naik and said, you know, I live in a totally Islamic environment. The men pray 5 times a day, all the women are in burqa, and yet child molestation is so rampant. They rape children in madrasas, and they do it all the time. There's child abuse horribly over there. So can you tell me why living in this Islamic environment, child abuse is so rampant? You know what he does? He shames her. He says, are you a Muslim? And the girl was in hijab herself. He shames her. He says, how can you say this is an Islamic society when there's rape happening over here? And she was just forced to sit down. Now, don't say that women cover themselves up just because they want to. They are forced into it.
Thank you. I think we got to end in 3 minutes. So, एउटा त्यहाँबाट प्रश्न यता लिऊ अनि त्यसपछि एन्सर गरौँ न सकौँ। हजुर प्लिज।
So my question is to Mandar sir, and I'm quite following India and news about Indian politics and stuffs. So my question is, whatever the lynching or whatever the prosecution against Muslims that is happening in India is often portrayed as a diversion or digression of the unemployment and so on, and that diversion is often propagated by the liberal circle of India, and that is quite quite sickening to see. Finding a temple inside a mosque is a diversion to the Adani issue. Is it the diversion, or is it the end that India's Hindutva fascists are doing? And there is what makes me numb is that India's liberal opposition never ever pronounce the word Muslim. They use the word minority. Are the Jains of India prosecuted? No. So why Rahul Gandhi and those supposedly liberals are not explicitly speaking, not calling spade a spade?
Since there's so little time, thank you. I'm not shutting you off, but let's take this one other query or comment and then we'll finish up.
Thank you very much. Very enlightening, and then very nice to hear both of you, your perspective from the background from Pakistan, growing up in India. My name is Sunil Babu Pant. I started gender and sexual minority rights campaign 25 years ago, got elected as the first openly gay member of parliament in Asia from Nepal in 2008. I'm flaunting this identity because my question is related. We talk about, I have two questions, but I'll only ask a question around secularism, not around democracy. You talk about secularism and religious fundamentalism. We talk about the fundamentalism, whether it's Hindutva or Islamism or other thing, having a problem. My question is, this religious fundamentalism is problem for whom? And who would benefit from the secularism, for example? Because all this religion now existing in the world, patriarchal, people like me are not accepted, women are second class. So for us, all this religion, whether it's moderate form or a fundamentalism, it's already a fanaticism for us, because we live in the fear all the time, no matter. So in your modernization or the secularization of religion, where do you see we fitting with these existing narratives and all these scholarly and the ideologies that all this religion propagate? From your point of view, we can be moderate like this. Where do we have our space in your form of secularism?
Thank you. Harsh, could you reply to both and then?
Wonderful questions, both of them. I wish we had more time. Firstly to you, when the order was passed first to decriminalize homosexuality in India, Justice Shah Muralidhar said something very beautiful. It was a time when we have these debates where everybody you have those 6 boxes and everybody's screaming at each other. The only time I've seen those 6 boxes with everybody agreeing, they had members of every men of every religion, all of them agreed that homosexuality should not be legalized. And what they said in response was that our constitution gives us the freedom to follow our personal moralities. But when there's a clash between personal morality and constitutional morality prevails, and whatever you feel your religion allows and does not allow is not relevant because the constitution says equal rights. So that's a clear. And to you, my friend, what you said. See, firstly, that I totally agree. Even Rahul Gandhi doesn't mention the word Muslim and the capital M word. And if people push him also, he'll say, yes, everybody's in trouble, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, OBC, something, and also minorities. So there is a defensiveness, and that is absolutely right. You said, is it really diversionary? My answer to that, and I'll give it in one line, there is an ideological battle. Even if it was not diversionary, this is what the RSS believes in. But it also is serving a diversionary process, sort of benefit, because we are living in a period where there is totally jobless growth, young people don't have a future. So it is diverting from that, it's diverting from cronyism, but even if it was not, it is ideological.
Thank you. Moral truths, even in religion, have undergone evolution. Look at the fact that the Quran, and please contradict me if you don't agree with it, allows for slavery, and yet Pakistan as an Islamic state formally forbids you to own a slave. Formally, I am not allowed to have a picture of any living human being in my room, but now everybody watches television, including mullahs who now rush to make their own television channels or be invited onto it, and who keep taking selfies of themselves knowing that this is haram. So morality has changed over time. In time, Muslims, Islam will accept homosexuality, just like, amazingly, Pakistan is remarkably progressive in accepting transgender people. Not homosexuals, but transgender. And the debate will continue. So nothing is fixed. There's hope.
Thank you. Let me make some concluding remarks. Just that it seems to me from this conversation, the river is already poisoned. The question is how to depoison it, whether we talk about Pakistan or growing trends within India and all over South Asia. Very dangerous forms of populism are taking off, and it requires individuals of courage, personal courage, to stand up against the flow. And in that sense, I thank both the gentlemen on the stage here for epitomizing the kind of South Asians we need to save South Asia and to depoison the well or the river. And we are here in the country where Nepal is where, within Nepal, when Nepal didn't exist as a nation state, is where Siddhartha Gautam was born. And if Siddhartha Gautam has one message, it was that of empathy. So if South Asia as a whole and each of our societies as a whole need to have a value within each of us, it is the value of empathy, saha anubhuti. And in that, if I were to take that one step further, then what we need, as we have seen from this conversation with Harsh and Parvez, is that you need to be self-critical of your society, of yourself and your society. If you dare to criticize the other, if you are up to criticizing the other, first you have to be able to question your own. And both Parvez and Harsh have first and foremost shown the ability to critique the societies that they come from. And to me, that is the value, and that is what leads to empathy. And as far as Nepal is concerned, we're holding this meeting in Nepal. Let us say that for now, the river in Nepal is in the process of being poisoned, and let us start the process of depoisoning before we are overwhelmed by the tsunami. Thank you all. Thank you both of you. Bye. And let me now thank Jivanji, who is now going to whisk them away to Chitwan for the Chitwan Kacheri. Thank you.